So today we're looking at a piece of equipment that solves an issue most of us that use a terrestrial laser scanner have come across in our day-to-day workflow, dealing with low light or no light conditions. When we use a terrestrial scanner, we're typically not only collecting LiDAR point data, but also pictures. Pictures that are used to both create the panorama imagery that gets embedded into the point cloud and used to apply RGB data onto the points we capture. Without that imagery, we have to rely on coloring the points using some other metric, typically intensity when we're talking about terrestrial laser scanning. And while coloring by intensity can work, in my experience, clients much prefer having real-world colors to work with. Likewise, having panorama imagery embedded into the data can be extremely valuable when trying to extract metadata from a dataset that the points can't provide on their own. Under normal circumstances, the ambient lighting in areas we're scanning usually provides plenty of lighting to properly expose the images that are captured during the scan process. But what happens when you get to a site and the power is out in certain rooms, the lights just aren't working for whatever reason, or there never were lights to begin with? In my experience, this is far from uncommon, and just in the past few weeks since I got this lighting rig, I encountered a hotel room where the lights wouldn't turn on, dim areas in a manufacturing plant that never had lights, and one day that I was on site, a storm hit and the site lost power altogether. In the past, I may have scanned as is and delivered data without usable RGB data or imagery in those locations, but when a client is spending $50,000+ for scan data, they want it done right. In the past, I've gotten away with strapping a headlight to the scanner or lugging around a flood lamp with an external power source, but these solutions either provide less than desirable results or slow you down having to deal with a clunky solution. Not to mention, it just doesn't look professional. And I would be lying if I said I haven't faced some disappointed clients when they get their data back with less than ideal imagery. I recently landed a large project with an educated client that actually mandated in the contract that external lighting be used in areas with poor lighting conditions. And since this site was going to be multiple thousands of scans, I knew it was time to invest in a proper solution. So I reached out to the folks over at Scan&Go to see if they could help me out, and a week later I had their LED lighting rig in hand. It came with everything needed to not only solve the problem of being able to capture properly exposed imagery in low light conditions, but do so in a professional package that didn't slow me down in the field. Opening the box, we've got our RTC 360 adapter to change the Leica RTC mount to a 5/8 inch arbor. On top of that, we have the light ring that has 6 cold shoe mounts, then 6 LED lights that have 3000 milliamp hour rechargeable batteries built in that's secured to the ring using a locking nut. Then the extension pole to bring your scanner up above the lights, and as we'll see in a moment, it doubles as a fantastic handle when moving the scanner. And finally, the adapter that turns the top 5/8 inch arbor back into a Leica RTC mount. Putting it all together takes about a minute, and when it's assembled, it's extremely stable. Each one of these lights packs a punch at 850 lumens, and you can alter the color temperature between 3200 and 5600 Kelvin. The construction is solid, it's aluminum where it should be and lightweight where it can be. Once it's mounted, there's no wobble, and like I previously alluded to, you can pick up and move the scanner by the extension pole, which works as a natural handle. When I first set it up, I was wondering why it was a bit longer than it needed to be, but after using it, it became immediately obvious why they chose to make it this way. I would even go as far to say that it was actually probably easier to move my RTC around with the lighting rig attached than without. The lighting rig puts the RTC in a position where it just balances the whole package almost perfectly. I've seen other solutions that mount lights to the legs, but I often find myself scanning in tight spaces where I can imagine those would be catching on things as I navigate those nooks and crannies. Also, you do ideally want the light source coming from as close as possible to the cameras to make sure you're illuminating what the camera is seeing. Let me jump back to those lights for a second. These lights provide soft and even lighting, and the diffusion looks great. No harsh spots, no glare. At full brightness, you'll get about 2.5 hours of use, And since they use a standard cold shoe mount, if you ever need to replace one, you're not limited to dealing with the manufacturer. And you can always pick up a set of spares if 2.5 hours of scanning in the dark isn't enough. Given that it takes about an hour to charge these lights, and the kit comes with everything you need to do so, if you do buy a set of spares, you can scan perpetually without worrying about downtime due to batteries. I also appreciate how you can take the entire rig off the tripod as a single unit to either charge or stow away temporarily. So when switching between dark conditions to normal scanning, the swap takes about 15 seconds, but like I already mentioned, I actually almost prefer to just leave the rig on. Practically speaking, the lighting obviously makes a huge difference, both in the RGB values of the points themselves and the pano images in low or no light situations. You're able to get usable color data in scenarios that would otherwise just produce black points when viewing the point cloud via true color. Now, the RTC takes HDR imagery, so even in poor lighting conditions, this scanner does a pretty good job, but HDR can only take you so far. On the other hand, for scanners that capture imagery and points simultaneously, like Regal's VZ600i typically does, it was always a battle for me to have enough light to properly expose the imagery because the scanner limits the shutter speed of the camera. If anyone hasn't seen my RTC versus VZ600 video, give that a watch to see the difference. If I were using the VZ600 inside, having this lighting rig would almost be a necessity. So do clients really need imagery? Is it really worth it when we're scanning in the dark? Personally, I feel pano imagery is often underutilized, and when you set up or educate your clients on how to make the most of these panos, they often don't want to go back. Viewing the scan data as a pano tour makes it so much easier for those that may not be used to navigating a 3D point cloud on its own. Not to mention, it gives you access to a level of detail of metadata that you just simply cannot get from the points themselves, even when they have RGB values. Especially in the BIM or digital twin world, and I do mean real digital twins, not point clouds, I'm finding it more common that my clients are wanting a higher level of metadata that you'll never get from point data. And being able to measure and digitize using pano images is something that far too many people are sleeping on. I can only see the imagery aspect of 3D scanning becoming more popular and showing up on more requests for proposals. The point data still obviously provides the geometry that is the backbone of the dataset, but imagery adds an additional layer of usability and value. Consistent ambient lighting is also helpful for field registration. If you've ever used the RTC in dark areas, you know what I mean. The Viz system relies on the external fisheye cameras to track the scanner's position as you move from one setup to another. If it can't see the features around it, you almost always have to manually place them in every single scan. When I used the lighting rig, the Viz system worked almost flawlessly. And an added secondary benefit of safety should not be ignored. When we're scanning, we're typically never more than a few seconds away from the scanner, but to ensure we're not captured in the scan, we usually hide out of sight. In some cases, you can be taking a bit of a chance leaving a scanner in a dark area if there is equipment moving around on site. That's not a concern when I'm using this lighting rig. It's pretty hard to miss this thing. Anyone within eyesight can see exactly where the scanner is, and when moving the scanner from one position to the next, being able to see any tripping hazards or overhead hazards is a major benefit. Yeah, a headlamp works for whatever is directly in front of you, but it's certainly not as good as having everything in the room lit up. Now, this isn't a cheap kit, but given the construction quality, the convenience, and the performance, it feels reasonably priced for what it offers. Now, we're talking about $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 scanners here, and it's certainly not uncommon to charge out $4,000 to $5,000 a day when scanning in the field. 1,500 euros is kind of a drop in the bucket considering the time and headache saved from using this solution. I've gotten by with jerry rig setups for a few years now, and to be honest, my only regret is not getting this sooner. The longer I do this, the less patience I have for substandard tools that only sort of work. This isn't that. It does what it's supposed to do, and it does it well. Now, it's not some revolutionary new piece of scanning tech, but more like a really thoughtful upgrade that quietly improves your workflow. One of those you don't realize how useful it is until you've used it type of tools. So yeah, that's a Scan&Go LED lighting kit, a solid, well-built accessory that makes scanning in the dark a lot more practical and a lot more convenient.